Millions of shimmering silver fish poured down from giant tanks, spilling into Brazil's largest reservoirs. The once calm water suddenly boiled with the invasion of an exotic fish species. To solve the food shortage affecting millions of people facing drought, the Brazilian government carried out a continent-scale biological intervention strategy. They brought a single fish species from the Nile River to restructure the entire freshwater economy. At first glance, this looked like a major step forward. A million-dollar industry was born, providing cheap protein for the entire nation. But just beneath the surface, a serious reality was quietly unfolding. Wherever this fish appeared, 80% of native species had been completely replaced. They did not only take over rivers, they also broke through the final biological barrier and invaded coral reefs in the open ocean. What turned this creature into a billion-dollar economic machine for an entire country? And where did this large-scale release campaign truly begin? In 2023, tilapia production in South America reached more than 860,000 tons, contributing heavily to export revenue of more than $34 million to the North American market. This country now accounts for about 70% of the region's total production of this organism. The large-scale intervention began in 1950, when the first shipments of fish were brought from the Nile River and African lakes to South America. At that time, governments and major corporations needed a biological solution to clean industrial reservoirs invaded by algae. At the same time, drought-prone regions needed a food source capable of growing despite harsh weather conditions. A wide-scale breeding and release campaign was activated. Tens of thousands of giant floating cages were installed directly into natural reservoirs and river systems. Millions of tons of high-protein industrial feed were poured into the water every day, transforming natural waterways into massive aquatic protein production centers. From a few thousand experimental individuals, this fish reshaped the economy of many major states. Infrastructure, water pipelines, processing plants, and tens of thousands of workers were mobilized to serve the growth of a single species. Huge streams of money flowed into public budgets, but the doors of open water farming cages were never truly sealed. Nearly 80% of the organism population in many reservoirs today belongs to only one species. Seasonal floods, reservoir overflow, and torn nets during operations have released millions of fish into the natural environment. Their expansion is based on three core biological mechanisms. First, they possess a flexible omnivorous diet. They consume everything from aquatic plants, plankton, organic waste, to the eggs of other fish species. Second, their digestive system releases large amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus. When this waste accumulates, it causes eutrophication, stimulating algae and protozoa to multiply aggressively and draining dissolved oxygen from the water. Third is tilapia's characteristic mouth-brooding reproductive mechanism. The mother fish keeps all eggs and young inside her mouth, providing an absolute protective shield against natural predators. The survival rate of the next generation reaches almost its maximum level. The combination of these three factors causes the native food web to collapse. Local fish species lose food sources, living space, and even their next generation, leading to a severe decline down to the 20% mark. The most difficult question now lies on the table: should we keep the giant export industry or sacrifice tens of millions of dollars to save the final 20% of the native biosphere? Which way should the scale tip? Leave your perspective in the comments, because the line between development and environmental decline is always a question with no perfect answer. The decline in biodiversity creates a body of water that is structurally empty. Why can the environment's natural defense mechanisms not activate themselves to restore balance? With juvenile survival rates reaching more than 90%, thanks to the protective shield of the mother's mouth, nature has almost lost its ability to recover from this ecosystem transformation. Native predators are completely overwhelmed in both numbers and speed. The biggest difference lies in the reproductive cycle. Most native species in South America are locked into a strict ecological balance. They reproduce only when rainfall, water flow, and temperature change with the seasons. By contrast, tilapia operate on an uninterrupted cycle. It takes only 4 to 6 months for a female to reach sexual maturity. Unlike local fish that spawn only once a year, one exotic female can release 1,000 to 2,000 eggs repeatedly every 3 to 4 weeks. Their ability to tolerate extreme temperatures and low oxygen environments allows them to reproduce continuously year-round. To regain control of the biosphere, humans were forced to launch a massive eradication campaign. Fleets of industrial boats were deployed to drag giant nets across entire lake surfaces, combined with unmanned diving devices, emitting high-frequency sound waves to herd and capture the fish. In some isolated reservoir systems, people even intervened by deliberately draining millions of cubic meters of water, lowering the water level almost to the bottom to isolate and neutralize the invader. Local control efforts using nets, traps, or manual hunting only reduced a very small portion of the surface population. The complexity of evolution once again exposed human weakness. When water levels dropped and oxygen ran out, native species quickly became completely exhausted. By contrast, the invader immediately activated a physiological dormancy state. They buried themselves deep in soft mud, reduced their heart rate to a minimum, and absorbed tiny amounts of oxygen through the skin surface to survive for weeks. As soon as groundwater flow returned, they immediately rose again, reproduced, and occupied the empty living space. Their exponential self-replication at the bottom of the lake easily replaced the individuals that had been lost. Being trapped in freshwater systems was already a major problem, but a new biological transformation pushed the severity of the situation beyond the limits of the continent. An evolutionary leap was about to rewrite the entire global biological map. Until now, scientists had always believed that saltwater, with its completely different osmotic pressure, would be the strongest natural barrier stopping the spread of this organism. But radar data and underwater camera systems in estuary zones recorded a truth that changed every biology textbook. Coastal biological monitoring stations have recently recorded the appearance of huge schools of this fish in river mouths, mangrove areas, and even moving straight into the coastal waters of the Atlantic Ocean. This fish possesses euryhaline ability, a biological mechanism that allows it to tolerate extreme changes in salinity. At the cellular level, an extraordinary biochemical mechanism is activated within just a few short days instead of millions of years. Through its osmotic regulation system, its gills automatically adjust salt filtration and water retention. Special chloride cells in the gills continuously multiply to pump excess salt out of the body, while retaining precious freshwater in the blood, allowing a creature born in freshwater to function normally in seawater. Migration into the ocean means tilapia have begun seizing the breeding space of coastal marine fish. Mangrove forests, known as the nurseries of the ocean, are now being transformed into a massive exploitation zone. This voracious invader consumes eggs and natural food sources to exhaustion, changing the food web of the entire coastal ecosystem. This population has moved beyond the limits of artificial reservoirs and rivers, turning thousands of kilometers of coastline into an ecological risk zone. Facing this limitless level of spread, physical intervention methods are no longer effective. Humans are forced to seek deeper levels of intervention to reverse the situation. An effort to apply molecular technology has officially begun. Controlling a fast-reproducing organism in the natural environment without affecting other species requires absolute precision. Major fisheries research institutes are now deploying molecular-level interventions and closed-system technologies to stop its spread. This massive campaign is being secured and carried out through giant sterile hatchery systems, where genetic codes are separated and rewritten to turn tilapia itself into a tool for self-control. Supermale breeding technology is being applied to manipulate chromosomes. By intervening in embryonic development, scientists create generations of fish carrying YY genes. Millions of these artificial supermales are then released by helicopter directly into occupied waters to dilute the sex ratio of wild populations. When these fish reproduce, they produce 100% male offspring. This reduces the probability of finding females for mating, causing the invasive population to decline naturally. At the same time, CRISPR gene editing technology is also being tested to create completely sterile fish lines. In terms of aquaculture infrastructure, the industry is shifting millions of dollars into biofloc systems. This is a closed farming structure that uses bacterial colonies to break down all nitrogen and organic waste directly inside the tank, converting it back into food. Water is continuously recirculated and not discharged outside, completely isolating the farming environment from natural river systems. Industry promotional materials often describe this technology chain as an ideal model, a biological achievement capable of correcting every mistake of the past. However, independent investigative reports, combined with annual data from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and climate monitoring satellite imagery networks, expose hidden risks that are rarely mentioned. The first is the unpredictable downside of genetic intervention. No scientist can guarantee 100% that CRISPR technology or YY gene structures will function perfectly once released into the wild. If these edited genetic codes accidentally cross with naturally mutated individuals, we may create a new variant line with even greater tolerance and reproductive power, completely destroying the final chance of recovery. The second issue is that satellite imagery across areas using closed biofloc systems has exposed a serious energy problem. Maintaining continuous 24/7 aeration networks and strict temperature control for tens of thousands of massive tanks requires enormous electricity consumption, forcing nearby thermal power plants to burn millions of additional tons of fossil fuel and release large amounts of carbon emissions. Protecting one river from biological invasion is being traded for draining energy resources and worsening the speed of global climate change. Every technological measure requires massive funding and coordination from government level down to each production facility. Above all, it raises an enormous question about the true limits of human power over Earth. The shift of tilapia from a solution for algae control and protein supply into a large-scale ecological challenge clearly reflects the risks of artificial intervention. It is a classic case study of the era in which humans grant themselves the power to manipulate the biosphere, under the illusion that we can easily reprogram the pieces of nature to optimize industrial supply chains. Moving a biological component to solve a short-term economic goal always brings irreversible changes to native habitats. The decline of 80% of local fish populations proves that natural ecological networks operate through complex interactions that humans cannot easily calculate in advance. Nature is not a collection of mechanical parts that can be freely removed and reassembled. It is a delicate web of connections, where changing one basic component can create a shockwave that collapses the entire system. The future of resource management and ecosystem restoration does not lie in introducing exotic organisms, but in understanding how the environment operates. Current digital technologies and molecular biology only become powerful when applied alongside strict spatial planning for aquaculture, completely isolating biological risks from the integrity of nature. The mistakes of the past have been clearly recorded by Earth, but they are also an opportunity for us to shape a more sustainable future. If you are fascinated by the science behind humanity's large-scale intervention projects and their impact on global ecosystems, press the subscribe button now. Do not forget to like and share this video so scientific knowledge can spread, and so we can raise awareness together to protect the biosphere.